never seen a case grow like this. The more evidence that develops, the more difficult the case becomes.
So many people want to know what happened to their loved ones and who killed them.
We have no clue who this man is, but I want him to suffer.
The police completely went wild trying to find possible suspects.
Sex parties and drugs, a prominent businessman, a doctor, a police chief. This case is filled with theories.
But they can't all be right.
Who is the Long Island serial killer?
This case is like a maze. Every new theory, every new clue, every new suspect can lead you down a path you think will solve this case. And eventually, one of these paths is going to lead to the killer. But it was the search for Shannan Gilbert that introduced the world to the Long Island serial killer.
On May 1st, 2010, Shannan Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort, booked a date through Craigslist in Oak Beach, Long Island. Her driver, Michael Pack, took her to the home of Joseph Brewer and then waited in the car.
But something went wrong, very wrong. The next thing Pack knows is that Brewer comes out and says, "You gotta come in here and help me." When the driver went into the house, he saw Shannan hiding behind a couch, and she was on the phone with 911 saying, "They're trying to kill me." Shannan ran out of her client's house and into the night. That was the last time anyone saw her.
While searching the area for Shannan, police discover a female body in the bramble just off the main road.
It would seem clear that this would be Shannan, but almost immediately they realize that it isn't Shannan. They know this because Shannan has a titanium plate in her jaw. It's horrifying. Suddenly you find a woman like Shannan, but it isn't her. And then within a day, they find more. They find bodies of 4 women over 3 days. None of them are Shannan Gilbert.
The community in this area was completely shocked. It was something that no one expected, that there was literally a graveyard in their own backyards.
Although the police didn't find Shannan, they knew that these 4 burlap victims were linked. They were all about 500 feet apart from each other, and they didn't have jewelry, they didn't have identification, they were all in burlap bags, and they were all strangled. No one would have guessed that this one disappearance would open up one of the largest serial killer cases in U.S. history.
But who is responsible for these killings? Police hope the stories behind these 4 victims will help lead them to their killer and answer the questions behind Shannan's disappearance.
Of the 4 women whose remains were wrapped in burlap, Melissa Bartholomew, a 24-year-old woman who grew up in the Buffalo, New York area. It was the first that was found on Gilgo Beach.
Melissa was just great. She was my baby. When she was a little girl, we would lay on the couch and just cuddle for hours. She had the biggest heart. She was the happiest little kid. She always wanted to hug people. She always wanted kisses. If you were doing dishes, Melissa wanted to get right in there and help you out. Melissa finished high school and got her degree in cosmetology. Her dream was to go to New York City and work as a hairstylist and eventually open up her own salon.
Melissa was very close to her family. She adored her little sister, Amanda.
Her and Melissa were best friends. They were 9 years apart. Melissa was kind of like, you know, a mom. They definitely teamed up on me.
When she moved to New York City, she came home a lot, but her family had no idea that she was struggling to make ends meet, and Melissa was earning money as an escort.
My poor daughter went through hell, and I wasn't there to protect her. I didn't know anything about it.
It turns out Melissa wasn't the only one working as an escort. As a matter of fact, all 4 burlap victims were escorts finding their jobs on Craigslist. Just like Shannon Gilbert.
As police learn more about the burlap victims, more similarities arise, particularly in the circumstances of their disappearances.
On the night Melissa disappeared, she called her boyfriend and let him know that she had a $1,000 job on Long Island.
Melissa's boyfriend, he was going to drive her out there, but she refused, and she was being very secretive. She only said she was going to make a lot of money. Her landlord actually saw her sitting on the curb outside after midnight and saw her sitting there and then walk away, and that was the last time anyone saw her. This was the only time that Melissa went on a job without a driver, and unfortunately, she never came back.
Like Melissa, Maureen Brainerd Barnes was also lured away without a driver.
Maureen was from Connecticut, and on the night that she disappeared, she was in New York City with her friend Sarah Carnes. Sarah and Maureen worked as escorts. They definitely kept in very close contact whenever they would go out to jobs. But during that time in Manhattan, Maureen had gotten robbed and all of her belongings had been taken. So when Sarah went back to Connecticut, Maureen had stayed in town because she needed to make some extra money. Somewhere during that time frame, she met the Long Island serial killer.
Megan Waterman was in Long Island when she went missing.
On the night Megan Waterman disappeared, she had commuted from Portland, Maine, and was staying at the Holiday Inn in Hauppauge, New York by 1:30 a.m. She had taken a job and had left the hotel to meet this client. What was odd was that she left without any of her belongings. She didn't have her ID or her phone, and she was known to go everywhere with her phone.
Like Megan, Amber Costello also left her personal belongings, including her cell phone.
The night that Amber Costello disappeared, she was on the phone with a client who was offering her $1,500. The client called several times, and with every call, Amber was getting more comfortable. Dave Schaller was Amber's housemate and really wanted to drive her. He wanted to make sure that she had a phone, and she told Dave, no, that's not what he wants. And that the client was picking her up down the street. And so Dave let her walk out of the house, and that was the last time he saw her.
Each of the 4 burlap victims were without a driver when they disappeared. He told these women to come alone, and he lured them with over $1,000. Even if they did have reservations, it was hard for them to turn down that kind of money.
Well, he offered them exorbitant amounts of money. What was amazing is how he got some of them to leave their cell phones.
All of these women had spent time on the streets. They were savvy. They knew how to protect themselves. And there was something about this killer that disarmed them, that made them feel comfortable, that made them abandon their usual protective measures and to trust him.
We're talking about a whole different breed of person here. He has the verbal skills to be able to communicate in a way that's not threatening, almost as though he is a puppeteer. grooming that victim, making sure that this woman is somebody that he can manipulate, that he can control, and he can manage. He knows in the end what he's going to do, and she has no idea. He's involved in predatory behavior, and he's enjoying the hunt.
The girls all disappeared between May and September during the summer months.
It does point to a certain kind of MO, given that we don't know of anyone who hasn't disappeared in the summertime.
Was this person a teacher or a fisherman? Someone who commuted in and out of that area and was only in the Long Island area during a certain time period.
He is a seasonal hunter. Where does he go for the rest of the year is a question.
The 4 burlap victims were found in December 2010, but winter forced police to call off the search for Shannon until spring. When they resumed, police were astonished to find 6 more bodies.
The big difference is these bodies were not wrapped in burlap. They were dismembered.
After finding the 4 burlap victims, police returned to Gilgo Beach in the spring, continuing the search for Shannon Gilbert. Instead, they find something even more terrifying.
They find 6 more bodies.
Now they have 10 bodies. But these 6 more bodies aren't wrapped in burlap, and most of them are dismembered.
They were only able to identify one of the victims, and that was Jessica Taylor.
Jessica is another escort working on the internet who disappeared a few years before the others. What makes Jessica different from the others is that they already found other parts of her remains further out in Long Island in 2003.
Jessica's skull, hands, and forearm were all discovered on Gilgo Beach. Her naked torso had been found 45 miles away in Manorville in 2003.
Jessica Taylor wasn't the only victim found in multiple locations. Partial remains of an unidentified woman, Jane Doe 6, were also discovered both on Gilgo Beach and in Manorville.
Another one of the victims was a John Doe. A young Asian male was found wearing women's clothing and had been beaten to death. In this tragic graveyard, police are horrified and shocked to identify a toddler as one of the victims. Through DNA testing, they connect the toddler to Jane Doe number 3. The toddler was found 10 miles east of her mother. They were both found with similar jewelry on. It was clear that whoever this killer was wanted to make sure that there were no witnesses, and it didn't matter. The victim was a toddler.
The last of the dismembered remains are the skull and teeth of another unidentified female, found on the outskirts of Gilgo Beach.
A detective who had been working a previous case where legs had been found by hikers on Fire Island suggested that they run a DNA match. And it was a hit. It was an exact match. Those legs were found in 1996. At this moment, when the match was made, the entire scope of the case was blown apart. And investigators realized they could be dealing with a serial killer that had been active for over a decade.
The discovery of the new bodies has investigators perplexed. The pattern of the killer appears to have changed.
You have one set of remains that's male. You have one that's a child. You have some who are confirmed to be Craigslist escorts. It's a different MO. It's not the whole body in burlap. It's part of the remains in one place and part of the remains in the other.
That begged the question of whether or not this was one killer who had completely changed the way he went about killing.
Maybe it was just too messy to, decapitate and dismember the bodies, and it was a lot easier just to strangle them.
Or now they have two serial killers on the loose.
You could have the Gilgo Beach serial killer, and then you could also have a separate serial killer that goes back many years, who's more focused on eliminating body parts and disposing of them in different places.
In the Manorville killings, there wasn't the same amount of press and attention as there was to the Long Island serial killer.
A gruesome find by Gilgo Beach.
Tonight, police say they discovered 3 more bodies.
All serial killers try to keep up on the news. They like to hear about themselves and see about themselves.
Could this be a killer who became jealous and enraged of the attention the Long Island serial killer was getting and decided to dump body parts from the murders that he committed in the dumping grounds of the Long Island serial killer?
What is now very clear is that the area in and around Gilgo Beach has been used to discard human remains for some period of time.
Gilgo Beach is just this long, narrow road that goes for miles and miles and miles. And at night, it's kind of foggy and it's kind of creepy. For a serial killer, this is the perfect place to dump bodies.
People in law enforcement like to talk about Occam's razor and how the simplest explanation is often the explanation. And, to the police, the simplest explanation is that it's one killer who has evolved over time, who started by killing people spontaneously without a lot of planning and then started to get more refined. Developed the technique of looking for victims on Craigslist and Backpage, developed the technique of storing bodies and not distributing them in different places, coming up with a trophy area to leave bodies. And that, on one level, makes a lot of sense. But historically, this isn't always the case, that it isn't always one serial killer, that often there are copycats.
As investigators struggle with the scope of the crime scenes, they're contacted by detectives working an eerily similar cold case in Atlantic City.
4 women found in a ditch.
We're talking about 4 women who were all escorts, just like Gilgo Beach.
The killer was dubbed the Eastbound Strangler because he lined these women up facing east. There were many similarities between the case of the Eastbound Strangler and the Long Island serial killer. All of the victims had been known to work as escorts. Many, if not all, had died from strangulation. Their bodies had been lined up in what seemed to be a very methodical, precise way.
This guy is a sexual sadist that derives a lot of pleasure from seeing women suffer.
The Atlantic City victims were found 7 months before the first disappearance of the Gilgo Beach victims. It makes it possible for the same killer to have started in Atlantic City and then moved on to the Long Island area.
You're talking about an area, Atlantic City, that is really just a few hours' drive away to the south. It made a lot of people wonder if this isn't a roving killer who goes where the opportunity is and if the cases are connected.
Atlantic City detectives think they have a break in the case when an escort, Pamela Cavelli, tells police she thinks she met the killer just days before her friends were murdered.
Pam told police that she was with 2 escorts when she met this guy at the Flamingo Motel in Atlantic City. She described him as being white with greasy hair. He had a lot of money and supplied them with cocaine. But Pam got uneasy when he started talking about how much he hated women. He called them all. He even bragged about how he was accused of murder in the past. Pam got creeped out and left, but her friends stayed behind. And their bodies were found 3 days later behind a motel in Atlantic City.
Despite the description, police are unable to identify a suspect. While comparing the 2 sets of killings, detectives question whether or not the Eastbound Strangler and Long Island serial killer are the same person.
When you look at the Long Island serial killer, you're looking at these women being buried in burlap and being extremely well hidden, whereas the Eastbound Strangler victims were open. They were able to be seen and viewed. The Eastbound Strangler is trolling for up-close and personal drug-addicted women that he can look at, talk to, have a conversation with, and get them in the car. Versus Long Island serial killer that's doing internet trolling. They hunt differently.
That is such a significant distinction for me that causes me to keep those 2 cases separate. The cat and mouse game that you see in Long Island, where there's this grooming process, there's this manipulation process, convincing them that he was safe, that takes place ahead of time. That's all very important to the Long Island serial killer. They were more than likely 2 separate serial killers.
Long Island serial killer is very good at talking. He does most of his stalking on the phone. The phone is his thing.
For the Long Island serial killer, the phone is a perverse and twisted weapon. After her disappearance, Maureen Brainerd Barnes' best friend, Sarah, received a strange phone call from an anonymous man.
Sarah says she got a call from a blocked number from someone saying that he knew where Maureen was, that she was at, quote, house in Queens.
Melissa Bartholomew's teenage sister, Amanda, also received a disturbing phone call.
She thought it was actually from Melissa because it was from her phone. It was like this older, middle-aged man.
He asked her if she was a like her sister.
He used the word in both phone calls, which indicates that this was the same guy. This was the first of 6 calls that Amanda received from Melissa's phone. And the man on the line continues to taunt her, and the calls become more and more horrifying.
And Amanda's phone rang. Caller ID had said Melissa, and I grabbed the phone from her. And as soon as he heard my voice, he hung up.
It just seemed that the phone calls were really about terrorizing Melissa's little sister. The last call that Amanda received, he asked her, "Do you think you'll see Melissa again?" And then he answered his own question and told Amanda, "No, you won't. I've killed her."
When he made his last call to Amanda, he told Amanda that he had killed her sister and he was going to watch her body rot. What he's leaving in that young girl's mind is, you're not safe. I know what you look like. I know where you're at. I may just show up at some time and surprise you.
I don't think she'll ever forget that voice. It's just something that probably will never go away.
Each time he called Melissa's sister, he kept the calls short. Each call lasted less than 90 seconds.
These calls were coming from areas that were very densely populated. The Long Island serial killer knew that making calls in these areas would make them hard to trace.
Shannon Gilbert's family believes they were also contacted by the killer months later. Only this time, the caller identified himself.
Shannon's mother, Mary, receives a call from Dr. Peter Hackett.
Peter Hackett is a emergency medicine doctor who's been living in Oak Beach for something like 20 years before Shannon disappears.
He called Mary Gilbert on May 3rd, right after Shannon disappeared. And he told Mary Gilbert that he ran a home for wayward girls and that Shannon had been in his home. He had medicated her, and she left with her escort driver, had not returned, and Dr. Hackett was concerned, so he called the mother.
Mary tells police about the call she received from Peter Hackett, and when police follow that up and contact Hackett, he denies ever having made the call. Through phone records, police prove that he had made the call.
It's been proven that he actually made those calls to Mary Gilbert. Why would he make those calls?
I do believe in my heart Dr. Hackett did play a major role in my daughter's death. It was already proven that he was a liar once by denying he called me for over a year.
There were surveillance cameras around Oak Beach when Shannon went missing. And 2 weeks after she disappeared, Peter Hackett went to police and asked them if they wanted surveillance tapes that he had of the night that she disappeared.
Peter Hackett testified he knew the importance and value of those tapes in finding Shannon Gilbert. And yet the videotapes were taped over.
It raised a lot of questions about why he would bring it up when it was too late to get them because they'd been deleted, and why the police didn't look at them in the first place.
You have two separate accounts from people saying a white male called to taunt them after the victims went missing. And you have Mary Gilbert, who proved Dr. Hackett called her with an odd story about her daughter 2 days after she went missing. You have the suspect timing of him bringing up the surveillance cameras to police. And yet there was no further investigation into Dr. Hackett?
People who suspect that Dr. Hackett is up to something researched his personal life, and they looked at his career, and they saw that he had a tendency for exaggeration in his life and over-elaboration and even spinning tall tales. And in fact, he got into trouble with it professionally. For a while, he worked as an emergency services coordinator on Long Island, and it happened at the same time as the TWA Flight 800 crash, a terrible tragedy in the New York area. And he was caught spinning stories of heroism from that time that just weren't true. And shortly after, he was sort of pressured out of that job.
One of the traits of a psychopathic individual is that they are pathological liars. They don't worry about their lying. It doesn't cause them anxiety. It's a natural ability to lie about everything.
On December 6, 2011, police found the belongings of Shannon Gilbert in the bramble along Oak Beach. A week later, police find Shannon Gilbert's body 400 yards from Peter Hackett's house.
The discovery of Shannon's body leads to a media frenzy in the area. And Dr. Peter Hackett has a very unusual response.
And you had nothing to do with Shannon Gilbert's death? That's correct. What about all the other girls? What was that?
My defibrillator. Son.
911.
No, don't. No, it's all right. No? I'm a doctor.
Police questioned Peter Hackett about the case, and he was never charged with anything. He's since moved away from Long Island.
One of the problems with a community like Oak Beach closing its ranks and circling the wagons and not talking to anyone is that it makes people wonder what they're hiding.
Prostitutes, murders, everybody's sick of hearing it. Everybody's just tired of hearing about the stories over and over again.
There were rumors that were swirling about things that were going on in that gated community, things like drug-fueled sex parties.
One of the theories in this case is that there was the group of wealthy men that were involved in the murders, and that it was a sort of an eyes wide shut scenario where these guys were picking up these escorts and then having their way with them and then killing them.
One of the theories is that Joe Brewer, who hired Shannon that night, wasn't just hiring her to see her alone. He was procuring a victim who the whole community could somehow victimize, that he had Confederates in the neighborhood.
Shannon did say, "They're trying to kill me." They, plural.
A sex ring that perhaps even had the police in on it, because why else would the police not solve the case?
Is this a prostitution operation that went awry? I think there's a lot of evidence for that and has to be examined. Shannon Gilbert's close friend has indicated to us that Shannon was looking to break into the wealthy market for sex of Suffolk County. According to this witness, Shannon Gilbert had a multimillionaire client, a fellow named Bissett.
Jim Bissett was an extremely wealthy man. He had this palatial estate with stables, pools, everything. His father owned a nursery, and the nursery had a lot of burlap bags. The theory is burlap bags were what the killer used to put his victims in.
The day after Shannon Gilbert's body was found, Jim Bissett committed suicide.
Bissett was well liked in the community. I mean, he was a family man, he had kids, and no one could understand why this man who seemingly had everything would commit suicide.
You know, someone who had access to burlap, who had a guilty conscience, that knew the police would be on their way the second Shannon was found, and so killed himself before he could get caught.
Psychopaths are not depressed individuals. They don't suicide because they feel terrible over killing other people.
James Bissett was a little too prominent to have a secret life as a killer. Somebody would have had to have known that he was disappearing here and there and storing bodies. It's much more likely that this killer is leading a very solitary, secluded life and is not a leading light of the community.
But what is it about the Long Island serial killer that has allowed him to elude capture for so long?
I think it's difficult to solve because in the beginning, the police screwed up.
The police didn't pull in the FBI at the beginning of the investigation, and they didn't create a profile for the Long Island serial killer.
Police really failed them in many different ways. They disappeared and they didn't care. Police say that Shannon Gilbert's death was accidental and that there was no foul play. I don't see why then they wouldn't release Shannon's 23-minute 911 tape.
Are there clues on those calls that could shed light into what really occurred that night?
She clearly was telling the police that someone was trying to kill her.
The question is, who are the people?
One of the homicide detectives in the case said that at no point on that tape was there any struggle. Shannon was always calm. According to the medical examiner, just the opposite. That there was a struggle and Shannon was not calm. So who's telling the truth here? The police have refused to release those tapes to the public for reasons they will not explain. We need those tapes.
In the middle of all this is the former Suffolk County Police Chief, James Burke, who has a very disturbing and troubled past.
James Burke, when he was chief of detectives, kept the FBI away from the Gilgo Beach case.
In 1979, a 14-year-old boy named John Pius was murdered. He had seen a group of boys steal a motorcycle, and when these boys discovered that, they forced him to swallow rocks until it caused him to asphyxiate.
Amongst that group of boys who did that was James Burke.
According to court documents, James Burke bragged around the neighborhood that he'd been involved in the murder of John Pius. And James Burke had a history and a reputation of violence. And that was one of the reasons why investigators had questioned him in the first place about John's murder. When he was asked about it, he came up with the alibi that he had actually been at a high school game. But when investigators looked into that claim, they discovered that there had been no game that night. And so James Burke decided to talk and testified against the other boys who were there that night.
There are some people who think that Burke was a lot more involved in the case than what he led on, that he actually participated in the murder of this kid. The three boys had said that Burke had something to do with it, that he was involved. But somehow Burke, became a witness for the prosecution, and he didn't get punished in any way.
James Burke rose up through the police force and then became incredibly corrupt as a police officer.
Burke, according to my investigation and other witnesses I have, was running a ring of prostitutes himself out of his home while he was advancing up through the ranks of the police department.
Loretta Rickenbacker, convicted numerous times for prostitution and drug sales, not only lived with Burke for months, but he was found to have had sex with her in a police cruiser.
He still kept going higher and higher up in the ladder until he actually became the chief of police. Eventually, he got in hot water when a heroin addict broke into his car and took a bag, and inside the bag there was sex toys and porn videos and things of that nature. They bring the heroin addict into the station. He makes a crack at Burke, calling him a pervert. And Burke just attacked him.
They chained me to the floor for 10 hours, beat me, assaulted me.
According to the indictment, Burke threatened Loeb as well as the other officers to all keep their mouths shut about the beating.
James Burke was investigated by the federal authorities. He was convicted and he is sitting in prison right now.
You wouldn't expect the chief of detectives of one of the highest paid police forces in the country to be behind bars facing corruption charges.
Burke was charged with obstructing justice. So who's to know whether he didn't obstruct justice in other cases?
Could he have done so in the Long Island serial killer case?
The county executive has said on the record that James Burke, when he was chief of detectives, kept the FBI away from the Gilgo Beach case. Was it because he was involved in the case, or was it because he didn't want the FBI anywhere near his other corrupt activities?
There always exists the possibility that Burke is involved in this cover-up, that Chief of Police Burke is involved in these girls through his involvement with prostitution.
One of the theories with serial killers and prostitutes is that a law enforcement person is involved.
All of these women are street savvy and they have protective measures in place.
They would be able to tell if somebody was going to harm them, and that a police officer lured them in. And a law enforcement person would be a person who could actually convince her or force her into his car.
Chief of Police Burke was assigned to the precinct that covered Oak Beach when he was an undercover cop, so he would certainly have had contact with that area.
These are puzzle pieces. We don't know how they fit together, but what seems clear is that James Burke was protected in that department for years and kept the FBI away from the Gilgo Beach case.
Does that mean he's guilty of these murders? Of course not. But it puts him closer within the ring of those who should be considered as potential suspects.
In December 2015, a new commissioner comes on board. His name is Tim Sinney. One of his first orders of business was to start a task force and to bring the FBI on board.
Bringing the FBI to the table with all of its expertise and resources is a step in the right direction.
FBI asked me what type of access will we have to the case, and I, without missing a beat, I said full access. I'm very confident And the investigators and the FBI, they're unbelievable public servants. And if this case is solvable, they'll solve it.
Now, with the help of the FBI, the Suffolk County Police Department is working on a comprehensive profile of the Long Island serial killer.
Somebody has to know something, and somebody needs to be held accountable why this case was screwed up so bad. She was my baby. She was my life, my firstborn. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of her. The things that Melissa missed out on in life, having kids, having a career. I'll never get to see grandchildren. I'll never get to see anything. This man took everything from our family.
I go back and forth about whether Shannon Gilbert's death is really connected to the deaths of the women along Ocean Parkway. On the one hand, she was in danger that night, I believe that, and the neighbors are hiding something, and she was disposed alongside the same highway a short distance away. On the other hand, she did have a driver with her, which is very different from the others. When we look at the pattern of how the killer seemed to focus on women who were alone, it seems kind of weird that he would somehow change it up in a way that would really be potentially dangerous for him. And so that makes me think that perhaps this might be the most incredible coincidence of all. That one escort's disappearance would lead to the discovery of 4 other missing escorts who the police weren't even looking for.
Even though they're perpetrating these heinous crimes, serial killers get married, they start families. On the surface, they seem very normal.
In my opinion, the person responsible for killing women on Gilgo Beach is still out there and is smart enough not to be working in Long Island anymore, but perhaps working somewhere else.
A lot of these guys can't not kill for a long time. They have that thirst to kill. He might go dormant for a while, but he's going to get that itch. And he's going to want to kill again.
He's still got to be doing it because there's no way you can kill this many people and stop.
He is still out there.
And the question is,
A young teacher headed out on a first date just days before Christmas, but she vanished without a trace. Her family sounded the alarm and police got involved fast. 11 detectives started digging. The truth that surfaced was so chilling even seasoned investigators struggled to believe it. And when the full story finally came out, it exploded across the whole country. Katie Latch was born in January 1992 pulgadas a suburb of London. She was the youngest of 3 daughters and there was a pretty big age gap between her and her older sisters. After finishing school, Katie went to university to study history and politics. Once she graduated, she landed a job teaching at a Catholic school in London, and it fit her perfectly. Even though the workload was intense and the responsibility was huge. Katie had always wanted to work with kids and she had that rare kind of energy where children just clicked with her almost instantly. And it didn't stop when the school day ended. Katie was involved in girls' youth organizations like Girl Scouts. And she was the kind of teacher her students knew they could turn to if something was wrong. Free time wasn't exactly something she had a lot of, but whenever she could, Katie was out doing water sports, especially kayaking. She loved it so much that she eventually became a licensed instructor. And every now and then, she the teach other people, too. On top of all that, she was big on charity work. In 2012, she volunteered at the London Olympics, and she even traveled to the United States to help kids from low-income families. In 2015, when she was 23, Katie was still working at the school and making plans for the future. She wanted a family one day, but with her job, she barely had any time left for a personal life. Katie was looking for something serious, and she tried to stay away from online dating, but with the kind of schedule she had. It was basically the only realistic way to meet someone. In early December, she met a 26-year-old man named Carl, and they started talking. Ed graduated from law school and had already worked at a few major firms, including almost a year on assignment in Moscow before starting his own legal company. On top of that, he ran a personal blog where he wrote about humanitarian issues and posted poetry. And as if that wasn't enough, he was also getting an additional legal education to keep moving up. The two of them clicked pretty fast, and by the end of the month, after a few weeks of messaging, they decided to meet in person. At the time, Katie was still living with her parents and she didn't tell them she was going on a date because she knew they'd worry. So, instead, she said she was spending the evening with a friend, and she took the train into London. The next morning, Katie's parents realized she still hadn't come home. They tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. So, they called the friend Katie had supposedly spent the evening with, thinking maybe she'd just stayed over. But the friend told them the truth. Katie hadn't gone to her at all. She'd gone on a date. And since the night before, she hadn't been in touch with anyone. The friend said she'd been trying to reach Katie since the early morning, too. And at one point, she finally got an answer, but it wasn't Katie on the other end. It was some man, he whispered. Katie. And then as she heard was heavy breathing before he abruptly hung up. That completely freaked her out, so she told Katie's parents everything she knew. Katie had planned to meet a 26-year-old guy named Carl in a busy area with lots of bars and restaurants. When Katie got there, Carl still hadn't shown up, and the texted saying he was running late. Katie messaged her friend basically saying, if I don't get her soon, I'm just going home. But not long after that, Carl arrived. They went into a bar together. And a little later, Katie texted again saying the date was going really well. That was the last time anyone heard from her. After that, every message and call went unanswered. Hearing all of that, Katie's parents went from worried to genuinely terrified. By then, a lot of Katie's friends already knew something was seriously wrong, and they jumped in to help. The first thing they did was track down Carl's social media profile, and Katie's parents messaged indirectly, asking the obvious question. Where is our daughter? Carl wrote back saying Katie had been with him until the early morning. But that a few hours earlier she'd left in a taxi and he had no idea where she'd gone. Her parents didn't know what to think and Carl was the only lead they had. So, they dug up his home address online and Katie's dad went over there to speak with him in person. When he got to the house, he found out Carl lived with his parents. His mom answered the door and told him Carl hadn't been home all night. He'd only come back after noon, and right now he was out walking the dog. Katie's dad explained what was happening, and Carl's mother immediately called her son, telling him to come home. And that's when everything turned surreal. Almost right away, Carl told her they killed Katie. He said he was a monster and told his mother not to cry for him. Then, as she was standing there in total shock, he kept talking. Carl said that night he'd gotten extremely drunk, and he'd strangled Katie. After that, he wrapped her in a blanket, put her into a luggage cart, wheeled her onto hotel property, and left her in some bushes. TNCD de plan token festo his parents after Christmas because edinte want to ruin the holiday for them. Before hanging up, told her was sitting on a bench in a park, and gave her the exact location. Katie's parents called police immediately, still clinging to the tiniest bit of hope that this had to be so messy. Horrible prank and that somehow their daughter was still alive. Officers went straight to that park and sure enough Carl was just sitting there on a bench, calm as anything, waiting for them. Up close, they noticed he was covered in scratches and there were blood stains on his clothes. As they put him in handcuffs, Carl told them exactly where to look for Katie's body. Police passed that information to their colleagues in London, who rushed to the location, and on the hotel grounds. They found her wrapped in a blanket, just like Ed said. The medical examiner later confirmed she'd been killed by strangulation, and there were a lot of injuries on her body that looked offensive. Everything pointed to Katie fighting back for quite a while. Then came another horrifying detail. Investigators found evidence of a violent sexual assault that happened after she was already dead. When Carl was brought in for questioning, police also took a blood sample. It showed alcohol in his system along with a mix of illegal drugs and prescription meds at the same time. Even though he already admitted what he did to his mother and had literally led police to Katie's body. Carl barely said a word in his first official interview. He ignored the detective's questions, refused to explain what happened, and just sat there in silence. So, detectives started building their own picture of that night. And they got one crucial piece from Carl's mother. She told them that during that phone call, he didn't just confess. He also gave her a quick version of his explanation. According to Carl, he accidentally strangled Katie during sex because he claims she agreed to something extreme with torture involved. But detectives didn't buy that story for a second. First, Katie's body was covered in scraps and scratches that were clearly inflicted while she was still alive. That part was unquestionable. And second, Carl assaulted her after she was already dead, which completely destroyed the whole accident narrative. So, police started rebuilding the timeline step by step. They tracked Katie and Carl's movements using CCTV phone location data and witness statements. After they met near a tube station, they went to a bar and sat there for hours. Staff and other witnesses said Carl was getting seriously drunk. And around 1:30 de la madrugada, Katie ordered a taxi from her phone. For the destination point, she put in a hotel about 40 kilometers away from that bar. And because it was right before Christmas, the roads were packed, so the ride took about 2 hours. Katie paid 65 libras for the trip with her card. At some point during the drive, Carl got sick and started vomiting. Because of that, Katie had to pay another 80 libras for the cleanup fee. And around 3:30 in the morning, they finally arrived at the hotel. Detectives later learned Carl had booked that room under his name shortly before he even met up with Katie. According to a hotel employee, he called barely stand. Katie basically had to guide him to the room so he wouldn't fall. Not long after that, Katie came back down to the front desk. She asked for 2 bruises, and she also ordered to breakfast for the next morning. Then around 9 de la mañana, Carl showed up at reception and paid with his bank card to extend the checkout time until 2 de la tarde. After he finally left, housekeeping went into the room and immediately noticed something was off. All the bed sheets were gone and the lock on the window had been damaged. So, at that point, police had a rough timeline of the night, but they still didn't know what actually happened inside that hotel room. Then, detectives started digging into Carl himself, and they quickly realized his whole successful luxury image was basically a costume. In reality, he didn't even have a law degree, and there was no real legal career behind him at all. But that was just the start. Police and medical records showed Carl had been on their radar for years. Back in 2009, he was arrested for assaulting his girlfriend. After that, he kept showing up in hospitals over the next few years with serious mental health issues. By early 2015, Carl was living with a different girlfriend and her family, and he was still regularly under psychiatric care. During one conversation with a hospital nurse, he told her something terrifying, that he wanted to kill his girlfriend's sister, strip her, and sexually assault her. The nurse reported it to police, and Carl responded by threatening to kill her, too. Not long after that, Carl actually called the police himself and said he felt like killing someone. He added that he was standing outside his girlfriend's house. Officers quickly arrested him and sent him for a psychiatric evaluation. During that assessment, Carl told the doctor he got excited by thoughts of murder. He said to urges had been in his head since he was a teenager and that they'd only gotten stronger over time. A month later, he pleaded guilty to threatening to kill his girlfriend's sister, and he was released on bail. Then, he ended up back in a psychiatric facility yet again. From there, he was transferred to a separate unit for men because he'd been having sexual contact with female patients who might not have been able to consent due to their mental health conditions. While he was hospitalized, Carl also said he wanted to kill his girlfriend's brother. But that statement wasn't treated as a crime, and part of the problem was poor communication failure. For whatever reason, information about Carl's past cases wasn't being properly shared between different hospitals and different police departments. So, they weren't seeing the full picture. They didn't even realize he'd already made threats like this before. At one point in the hospital, Carl looked staff in the eye and basically said, "When I get out of here, when you discharge me, I'm going to kill someone. Write that down." He said that in mid-September, just a few months before Katie was murdered. Police did look into it, but they still didn't treat it as a criminal threat. And the medical board decided Carl might have said it out of stress because he was under pressure with a discharge hearing coming up. Just a few days later, Carl was discharged and moved back in with his parents. On December 2, only a few weeks before Katie's death, he was given a 9-month suspended sentence for earlier threats he made against two people. On top of that, the court ordered him to do a full year of treatment under psychiatric supervision along with a 15-day rehabilitation program. Then in mid-December, less than 2 weeks before Katie was murdered, Carl met with doctors again and they concluded he wasn't a danger to the public. But here's the problem. Neither the doctors nor police actually had the full picture of Carl's behavior during periods when he'd been living elsewhere under the jurisdiction of other departments. So that lack of shared information might have shaped their decisions. As a result, Carl stood out in the world with barely any real oversight. And detectives later realized he didn't waste a second of that freedom. Once police got access to his online activity, they saw he'd been all over dating apps and websites. And at the time Katie was killed, he was talking to around 20 women. They also discovered he'd been messaging one woman for about 2 months. The day after Katie was murdered, before he was arrested, Carl called her and said he'd killed someone and that he was going to prison for a long time. And with the rest of those women, it wasn't just chatting. He'd been going on dates again and again, using basically the same pattern. He'd said they met up in the exact same area where he met Katie, take the woman to a bar, and before the date even happened, he'd find out where she lived, then book a hotel nearby, so it would feel more easy for her to come with him. He'd buy drinks, push them to drink more, get drunk himself, and if the woman agreed to go to the hotel, that's where they'd end up. But before Katie, he never actually hit anyone. And to make it even more chilling, detectives learned he'd already had another date lined up for Christmas Eve. Less than a day after Katie was killed. Even though detectives had built a pretty overwhelming case, Carl still refused to fully confess. and they definitely didn't want police getting into his phone. Still, in March 2016, 3 months after Katie's murder, stood in court and suddenly pleaded guilty. But even then, he wouldn't explain what actually happened. And that phone became a huge problem because investigators couldn't access it. Sentencing kept getting pushed back. Prosecutors believed one thing. If Carl was fighting the hard to keep them out, then whatever was on that device mattered a lot. And unfortunately, they were right. After months of pressure, Carl finally handed over the passcode, and police opened his gallery to something horrifying. There were disturbing photos of Katie's body taken after they assaulted her. Only then did he have something that vaguely resembled an explanation. He claimed her death was an accident. He went right back to the same story he floated earlier. That they'd been having sex with torture elements and that Katie had supposedly agreed to it. According to Carl, she placed his hand on her throat herself and accidentally strangled her. But even in his own version, he admitted what came next. That he assaulted her after she was already dead. He admitted he hid her body and then like nothing had happened, he sat down, ate breakfast, and checked out of the hotel. And tellingly, even Carl's own defense team didn't try to say this as some tragic accident. The story didn't match the evidence, and it sounded ridiculous on its face. Prosecutors saw it differently. To them, Carl was a violent sadist with terrifying fantasies, and Katie was the person he decided to act them out on. In their version, Katie saw it in basic human kindness. He was drunk, barely holding himself together. So, she got him to the hotel, paid small fortune for the taxi, and started to make sure he was okay. But Carl wasn't just drunk. He was under the influence of alcohol, illegal drugs, and prescription meds, all at the same time. And once they were alone in that room, prosecutors believed he attacked her, killed her. And did things so brutal they were hard to even put into words. Before sentencing, Carl was also evaluated by one of the country's most well-known psychiatrists. And the conclusion was chilling. The doctor said Carl posed a serious ongoing danger to women and that treatment was unlikely to change that ever. In the end, Carl was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 26 years. His lawyer read a letter where Carl apologized to Katie's family while Carl himself stayed silent. But that still wasn't enough it. Katie's parents didn't only blame Carl, they also blamed the system, including England's National Health Service. In their eyes, this wasn't just about one violent man. It was about the fact that crucial information didn't properly follow in from one hospital, one clinic, one department to the next. They believed that if his history, his diagnosis, and his escalating behavior had been fully shared across the board, doctors might have seen the full picture sooner and kept him away from the public. Because of that, a formal review was launched through the health service. Independent experts agreed on one thing. The coordination between a